the Smokies rise. Here where the wind blows ocean foam. Here where the wild swan flies. Blossoms adorn the dogwood tree. Down on the old home place. Tar on my heels feels good to me. Here in my state of grace. Carolina raised me straight as a mountain pine. Rocked me in her cradle, Southern mother mine. North Carolina is my home, home far beyond all praise. Goodliest home under heaven's dome. Here I shall spend my days. As a mountain pine, rocked me in her cradle, Southern mother mine. North Carolina is my home, home far beyond all praise. Goodliest home under heaven's dome. Here I shall spend my days.
On a morning in July of the year 1584, two English gentlemen in armor, accompanied by soldiers well armed, stepped into a small boat from the great ship which had brought them across the ocean. They had come from England, the noble England of Elizabeth and Shakespeare and Sir Francis Drake, sent hither by Sir Walter Raleigh, favorite of the Queen. Sunlight flashed from their helmets as their boat was rowed toward shore. A single Indian stood on the sandy beach awaiting the men from the ship. He was silent, unarmed, and alone, never making, one of the Englishmen said, any show of fear or doubt. After they'd stepped ashore, this lone man spoke to them gravely for several minutes. They knew it was a speech of welcome. At length, the Indian went to his own canoe, paddled out into the water, and began fishing. When he had filled his boat with fish, he returned to the shore, piled his catch on the beach, and indicated by gestures that the fish were for the Englishmen. Then he vanished. The natives are very handsome and goodly people, one of the Englishmen wrote in his notes, and in their behavior as mannerly and civil as any of Europe. The Englishman took his fish and claimed his continent. English America began here on a North Carolina beach. The next summer, and the next, and the next, English ships returned, bringing soldiers and scientists and surveyors, and finally, settlers. We know their names: Christopher Cooper, John Bright, William Waters. They are names like our names: Margaret Lawrence, Rose Payne, Jane Jones. We know how they lived in cottages with thatched roofs as at home in England, in a village they called Raleigh. We know that children were born, the first to Eleanor and Ananias Dare, a daughter named Virginia. We know everything about them except what happened to them. Their governor, John White, went back to England for supplies. War with Spain had broken out, and he was unable to return for 3 long years. When he did come back, full of anxiety, he and his crew reached the north end of Roanoke Island after nightfall. We let fall the grapnel near the shore and sounded the trumpet with a call. And afterward many familiar English tunes of songs, and called to them friendly, but we had no answer. The colony was lost. John White was sure they had merely moved. Settlers at Jamestown years later heard stories of English families living with the Indians in the back country. I believe they lived on. I believe their blood runs in our veins. Up here at the head of Buffalo Creek in Watauga County, there's a little place called Aho. Years ago, some of the men met around a stove at the store to decide what to call the place, and they couldn't agree, but they couldn't stay all night either. So after considering dozens of names, to which one or another of them raised an objection, they decided that the next word out of anybody's mouth would become the name of their community. They sat there a long time in silence, until Mr. B.B. Doherty stood up and stretched himself and said, Aho. That's how Aho, North Carolina got its name.
Hickory Dickerson, Dockery Dun,
Eckerwood Ridge and Poorhouse Run,
Farmer Friendship,
Franklin Fountain,
Bullfrog Creek, and
Birchard Mountain.
Long in the late 1800s, they decided to put a new post office in rural Randolph County. People said, why not call it this? Why not call it that? Somebody said, why not call it Why Not? That's the name to this day. Why not?
Yadkin,
Yancey,
York, Ripshin Ridge, and Roaring Fork.
Far from home, my mind embraces the nimble names of Tar Heel places, Topsail Sound and Turner's Cut, Dixon and Vixen and Devil's Gut,
Poke, Ash, Nash,
Calico, Calabash,
Pit, Hide, Pray, Dare,
Cape Fear, Cat Square,
Take Me Home to Teach's Hole,
To Looking Glass Creek and Frying Pan Shoals,
Bridal Veil and Blowing Rock,
and Currituck and Coin Jock. I'll know I'm home when I finally reach the top of a dune at Wrightsville Beach and stand there with my back to the sea, looking west toward Cherokee and imagining the miles between, from Ivanhoe to Aberdeen.
Candor and Biscoe, URE to Gold Hill.
Don't forget Granite Quarry.
China Grove and Cullowhee.
Miles farther than a man can see, except in the eye of his memory.
Turkey Den,
Tally-ho.
Doris Mills,
Chinkapin,
Pamlico,
Kildevil Hill.
Jenny Lind, Chasm Prong, Loudermilk Bend, Scuppernong,
Polecat, Possum Trot, Pop Castle Porter.
Swannanoa, Swan Quarter,
Slide, Slosh, Shoe, Small.
Rumbling Bald, Rural Hall, Lizard Lick and Licklog Gap, Level Cross, Old Trap, Snow Camp, Silverstone, Worm Creek, Whalebone.
Sleets Ferry, Spruce Pine, Shoot Fly, Sunshine.
When somebody started a mill on the Smith River in 1813, they called the place Splashy for the water the mill wheel threw up. By the time I came along, they had modified that to Spray. Spray sounded more genteel than splashy. Of course, you know what they call the place now. Eden.
Saxophone,
Waxarkana, Kate,
Overcoat,
Roanoke and Mattamuskeet.
Tony, Toady, Topsy, Trent.
I wonder which Peggy the old-timers meant when they named that hilltop Peggy Peak. And who was the Patchett of Patchett's Creek? I know a crossroads named Loafer's Glory. Oh, I'd love to know that story. To have met the loafers, to have known their faces, to know all the stories of the Tar Heel places.
Maiden Cakes,
Castlehane, Cap Lejeune, Walters Mill,
Weaverville,
Bonnie Doon.
Who was the man who had the temerity to name his town Sincerely Sincerity? It's smaller, but no sincerer than Raleigh, or Mabel, or Martha, or Mamie, or Molly. Exotic names on the signpost stands: Warsaw and Sparta, and Samarkand. They're not a bit like the cities for which they're named. You'd have thought Tar Heels might have been shamed to change it from Splashy to Spray to Eden.
But it came from the literature they'd been a-reading, and it sounded nice. And they weren't a bit coy. And where is Carthage?
Right down the road from Troy.
Baden and Maiden and
Aiden and Wise, Ranger and Granger,
Anchor and Spies, Dallas, Frisco, Providence too.
Now, where is the town that's home to you?
Minnesota.
Why not?
Down home, living is slow. No place folks wanna go. Why leave? All of them know that's where they wanna be. Down home, people still smile. Kind ways stay right in style. Kinfolks visit a while as kids climb in a big shade tree. Good friends, neighbors who care. Green grass, fresh country air. Such love all of us share. Who needs to roam? Down home, life stays the same. It's true, girls change their name, but they choose home-growing boys and add to all the joys down home.
boys' songs, work songs, and play songs, and church songs, and blues. And unlike white music, which came to North Carolina from England and Scotland, black music came really from nowhere but here. When Shirley Caesar of Durham thrills people all over the world with her gospel songs, she is giving them a pure North Carolina thrill. Shall we mention Dizzy Gillespie, who went to school in Laurinburg? Shall we name John Coltrane and Roberta Flack? Nina Simone of Tryon? Dr. Billy Taylor of Greenville? Thelonious Monk of Rocky Mount? Just say their names and reflect that jazz music, the only original American art and the richest, was made richer by far by a few original North Carolinians. Everybody knows that tobacco and textiles and furniture are North Carolina's great exports. Well, there's one other. You're listening to it. If a man's from the mountains, he'll tell you. If he's not, why embarrass him by asking? I'd rather be a knot on a log up here on Grandfather than have to live down at Collettsville. Oh, this is good, strong land. It must be, to hold up all the rocks we got around here. And mountain living is easy living. When your pumpkins are ripe and you've grabbled out your potatoes, all you have to do is start them, and they'll roll right down into your kitchen. Here's to old corn liquor. Whitens the teeth, perfumes the breath, and makes childbirth a pleasure. What does it taste like? It tastes like a lighted kerosene lantern or two cats fighting in your mouth. Does it improve with age? Well, I kept a quart jar of it a week one time, and I couldn't tell that it was one bit better than when it was new and fresh. Oh, yes, I've got religion. I believe it's a sin to feed chickens on Sunday. I feed mine on corn. There was a circuit-riding preacher come up this holler one time. He asked my neighbor lady, was there any Presbyterians around here? She said, well, Pa did kill some kind of varmint, nailed his hide to the back of the shed. You can go see if that's one. Well, what's your hurry, stranger? Light and come in if you can get in for all the plunder here on the porch. Come in and set a spell. Here's to the land of the long-leaf pine, the summer land, where the sun doth shine, where the weak grow strong and the strong grow great. Here's to down home, the old North State. He must have been noticing people way back then. Must already have been making up stories about them while he worked in Clark Porter's drugstore on Elm Street in Greensboro. But of course, nobody imagined that Will Porter was going to grow up to write stories the whole country would read, the ones he signed O. Henry. And how could anybody have known in Asheville that Tom, their paper boy, was a great novelist in the process of becoming? Tom, who lived with his mother at her boarding house, and walked the empty streets of the city before dawn, delivering the Citizen and listening to the train whistles. Thomas Wolfe never did get the train whistles out of his head. And the little girl growing up on her father's tobacco farm at Brogden, down the road from Smithfield. The one who had a little scar under her right eye where one of her sisters accidentally struck her with a hoe. Then she was just the youngest of the Gardner children, Ava. This is North Carolina, where the weak grow strong and the strong grow great, and you never can be sure how great they'll grow. Squire and Sarah Boone didn't know they were about to change the country forever when they said to their son, who was always wondering where the Yadkin River came from, well, Daniel, go on then and find out. And people who knew the young lawyer from Waxhaw, who so much enjoyed the cockfights and horse races at Guilford Courthouse, were pretty sure Andrew Jackson was never going to amount to anything. The Polk boy from Pineville, now he had better prospects. He was graduated first in his class from Carolina. They thought he might become a good lawyer, or even a circuit-riding judge someday. And Jacob Johnson, janitor at the inn on Fayetteville Street in Raleigh, was said to have been right proud when his son became a tailor's apprentice in Carthage. He felt Andrew had a good career ahead of him. And he did. But not as a tailor. Jackson, Polk, and Johnson each became President of the United States. The weak grow strong, and the strong grow great. Tar Heels from Dolly Madison to Judge Sam Irvin have gone to Washington to put their names in the history books. Ed Murrow went to London. Kay Kaiser and Andy Griffith went to Hollywood. And some have come here from far away, looking for something in North Carolina. Two brothers from Ohio came to the lonely shore, seeking only a steady breeze. December 17th, 1903. After running the motor a few minutes to heat it up, I released the wire that held the machine to the track and the machine started forward into the wind. The gulls and the terns saw it, a curious craft of hickory sticks stuck together with Arnstein's bicycle cement, rising there above the sand and the sea oats. There's more than one kind of pioneer, of course. I think of old Washington Duke walking 150 miles back to his farm at Durham after he was mustered out of the Confederate Army and going to work grinding tobacco. There began Duke University, Duke Power, and all the rest in the motion of Washington Duke's tobacco grinder. Here's to the land of the longleaf pine, home to Lincoln's mother and Whistler's mother, home to Dr. James E. Shepard and Dr. Frank Porter Graham, to Charles Brantley Aycock and old Max Gardner, to Gerald Johnson, David Brinkley, and Tom Wicker of journalism, to Billy Graham of evangelism, to Michael Jordan of basketball, to the Cohns of textiles, the Whites of furniture, the DeMilles of the theater, home to Chief Manteo and you and me. Great deeds were done on this land. That is prologue. Keep an eye on the paper boy, the farm girl, the dreamy-eyed kid. You're liable to hear from them later.
There's a place that's dear to me. Stay a while and you'll agree. It's the nicest place on earth to be. It's my hometown. On a day that's sunny, sweet, walk along some shady street where you'll speak to everyone you meet. In my hometown, each cool new evening brings the promise of a day in which to count your blessings, in which to work and play. Listen to the church bells ring, hear the children's choir sing, and your heart will feel the touch of spring. In my hometown. Each cool new evening brings the promise of a day in which to count your blessings, in which to work and play. Listen to the church bells ring, hear the children's choir sing, and your heart will feel the touch of spring. In my hometown, in my
The waiter brought the champagne and discreetly popped the cork in a fancy French restaurant on the east side of New York. The patron sipped it glumly with his caviar souffle. I could see his heart was heavy and his mind was far away. He said,
I was raised on black-eyed peas and a barbecue and butter beans and turnip greens and Brunswick stew. And every time I drink champagne, I yearn for buttermilk from Grandma's butter churn.
Then they served his pâté from the liver of a goose. Then they served his quiche Lorraine and his chocolate mousse. When they brought his cognac, he just shook his head and looked at me in sadness, and this is what he said. He said,
I was fed on crackling bread and country hams and sausage meat and hominy and candied yams. I've had a taste of all the world's cuisine. I wish I had a mess of collard greens.
He said his butler always serves him breakfast in bed. Says he orders buttermilk biscuits and gets croissants instead. Said they bring him Belgian waffles no matter how he begs for country ham, ham gravy, grits, and eggs. He said,
excuse me, friend, but tears come to my eyes each time I think about my mama's apple pies and sourwood honey from my papa's hive. Oh, sometimes men leave home and ruin their lives.
He said, friend, you get awful tired of brie. If you're going down home, tell them this for me. Just this one thing, tell them, I implore you. They don't serve chicken and dumplings in the Waldorf Astoria. He said,
oh, I've had those escargots that they serve in France. You pay your francs and give your thanks and take your chance. And when I eat lasagna down in Rome, I'm thinking about that liver mush back home.
Then he nodded to the waiter and sadly paid his bill and took his leave of me, and I can see him still with his head bowed down as he wandered forth, a Tar Heel starving in the north. He said,
now I'm eating sturgeon eggs that they serve on toast and thinking about that good food that I want the most, like barbecue and roasted ears of corn from that North Carolina farm where I was born, from that North Carolina farm where I was born.
Young folks, think on that man's folly before you board that bus in Raleigh and head north for fame and fortune. Just beware. They have limousines and designer jeans and diamond rings and such like things. But there's nothing to eat up there. Esse quam videre. That is our motto. They are Latin words, but they suit us. To be rather than to seem. The average North Carolinian never put on airs. He was more self-reliant than any Virginia aristocrat and more democratic than any South Carolina farmer. He sowed his crops himself and harvested them himself. And black or white, rich or poor, he considered himself to be the equal of any man. If I talk about the average North Carolina farmer as if I knew him, well, I did know him. He was my own grandfather. I can see you now, John Bishop, with your white mustaches, tobacco stained, and your roots so deep in the sand of Onslow that you seemed as much a part of nature there as the blueberries that grew in your ditches, or the frogs that croaked in your marsh, or the tall sycamore tree from a branch of which you hung me a swing to swing in. And I'm swinging there now, and you're sitting on your big toolbox in the shade of the back porch, fashioning a new axe handle to fit an old axe. And now Rena Bishop, good-hearted woman, my grandmother, her hair tied in a knot behind her head and carrying a cooking pot, opens the screen door to come to the pump on the porch and smiles to see me swinging. She was a teacher and lover of books, who taught the love of books and earned the love of many children, and especially of me. And I swing so high that I can see the woodpile, the watering trough, the corn crib, the barn, the shed under the hayloft from which we moved the wagon into the yard to make room for the Chevrolet, Aunt Trixie's home from teaching school. And I swing so high that I can see the mule in the pasture, old Red with a mean reputation, rarely hitched to the wagon now, only to the plow, for you cannot use a Chevrolet to plow a furrow. And there are the 2 cows browsing, and there are the 2 pigs sleeping in the mud. And there is the picket fence, whitewashed once upon a time, surrounding the twisted apple trees and the ripe smell of apples on the ground. And there is the smokehouse enclosing the moldy smell of hams and dirt and brine. And I swing so high that I can see down the sandy road to the fields of green tobacco, to the tilted tobacco barn, logs hand-squared and chinked with mud, where I stayed up half the night with you, John Bishop, during curing time. And you let me add logs to the fire. And because I liked to do it, asked me to draw the thermometer hung on a pulley on a length of tobacco twine up to the mica glass window from deep inside the barn, and asked my opinion, gravely, of whether the heat was staying even. And I remember the excitement of washing day and the great steamy cloud from the great black pot in the side yard, full of lye soap and long johns and overalls, which my grandmother stirred with a hoe handle. And the hard work and squealing and blood of hog slaughtering day, the day that resolved me never to be a farmer. And I can see the woodlot where the Venus flytraps grew, put there for the purpose of being tickled shut with a straw by little boys. And I can see the logging road beyond, limit of my world. What is a childhood memory for me was a life for you, John Bishop. I see you finish working on the axe and walk away toward the woodpile to cut kindling. And I, no longer interested in swinging, come running barefoot to watch your practiced swings split logs to splinters. You were a plain man, able, dignified, and kind, learned in many things, though not in Latin. Your epitaph, however, is there on the Great Seal in Latin. Esse quam videri. On every dusty country road in North Carolina, there stands a white frame church, looking as if it's always been here. But it hasn't been. William Byrd, the great old Virginian, traveling through North Carolina in 1728, wrote, "One thing may be said for the inhabitants of this province. They are not troubled with any religious fumes. They do not know Sunday from any other day, any more than Robinson Crusoe did." When he reached the capital, Edenton, he wrote, "I believe this is the only metropolis in the Christian or Mohammedan world where there is neither church, chapel, mosque, synagogue, or any other place of public worship of any sect or religion whatever." That was North Carolina, before the Baptists got here.
When the preacher finally says the last amen, church is over, and that's when we begin.
Spread that table, under the trees, shaking the cloth out, fanning the Sunday breeze. Appetite's ready, knowing no bounds, 'cause today we're having dinner on the grounds.
The Baptists, Free Will Baptists, Separate Baptists, Primitive Baptists, preaching the gospel from any rough platform or tree stump, brought religion home to every crossroads. And not only the Baptists, but also the circuit-riding Methodist preachers, ready with 3 hours of powerful oratory for wherever they had ridden to by Sunday. And the red gullies of the Piedmont echoed the Welsh chants, and the sand hills rang with the Scots accents of the great old Presbyterian orators. And there were Moravians proclaiming the Word of God in Old German. There were austere Anglicans and modest Quakers, but there were Baptists most of all.
Grandpa's pouring iced tea in each Dixie cup. Hungry children are first ones lining up,
Looking for Mama's chocolate cake. Where are those fried pies only Aunt Sue can make? Fend the flies off, scatter them hounds, 'cause today we're having dinner on the grounds.
And people from miles around would go to wherever the preaching was to be that Sunday, ride in their farm carts, or walk barefoot, carrying their shoes, so they could be clean shod when they got there. And some of the preachers became famous, and their preaching became a rural recreation. And then and there, in that great revival of long ago, was born the hallowed social custom of all-day preaching and dinner on the grounds.
Thank the good Lord for the bountiful supply. Say the blessing and grab some apple pie.
Get a cold biscuit, fill it with ham, reach for the pickles next to the candied yams. Picking up chicken, picking up pounds, 'cause today we're having dinner on the grounds.
And if one long day of preaching and singing and socializing was good for the soul, 7 days was 7 times better. In Lincoln County, on the banks of the Catawba, there stands a grove of ancient oak trees which have shaded the tents of the week-long Rock Springs Methodist Camp meeting for 150 summers and more, and will do so next summer, and every summer till the last hymn is forgotten and human fellowship no longer valued.
If you're passing by the church on picnic day, you're invited to come right in and stay under the shade trees. Plenty to eat, plenty of nice folks you'll be glad to meet. At the occasion, laughter abounds, 'cause today we're having dinner on the grounds.
Oh, today we're having dinner on the grounds. Amen.
the old dirt road still winds by there. The house still has that country air, and memories live everywhere. But there is nobody home. The winter sun still the mailman passes by, but there is nobody home. The swing hangs empty on the front porch now, but I can close my eyes and see Mama sitting there shelling butter beans, waiting for Papa, waiting for me. I see the upstairs window pane where I would stand and watch the rain or listen for the evening train, but there is nobody home. The swing hangs empty on the front porch now, but I can close my eyes and see Mama sitting there shelling butter beans, waiting for Papa, waiting for me. I see the upstairs window pane where I would stand and watch the rain or listen for the evening train, but there is nobody, nobody home. Nobody home.
The reality of any place is what its people remember of it. And there's been much memory in these songs and stories. We've left a lot of old things behind us, and nobody misses some of them. The ignorance and pellagra and tar paper shacks that are also part of our past. But I'll always be glad I have seen the shrimp boats leaving Beaufort with the sun coming up. And I'll always remember the night coming early to the coves and the mountains, while the ridges above were still bright with day. I remember the red gullies, the broom straw, the fields of corn stubble in the Mecklenburg November. And in spring, the daffodils that still bloom by the hundreds under a certain Orange County oak. I remember mills with blue windows and monuments to Confederate soldiers in sleepy courthouse squares. I remember bobolinks and buntings and mockingbirds mocking, loblolly pines and live oaks hung with moss, the taste of scuppernongs from vines my father planted. I remember making a slingshot from the fork of a persimmon tree and hunting rabbits with it along the creek bed. Those rabbits were as safe as if they'd been in their mother's arms. I never hit a one. Of course, it is all changed or changing. The music quickens, the cranes and bulldozers do their work. Those who look back on our state as it is becoming We'll have great cities to talk about and sing about. Skyscrapers, 6-lane highways, microchips and mega growth, and jet planes leaving contrails on the sky of Carolina blue. North Carolina is 503 miles from east to west and 187 miles from north to south. So there's room in there for your memories too, whatever they may be. Have you ever stepped on a sand spur barefooted? Then you must be from down home.
North Carolina is my home, here where the Smokies rise, here where the wind blows ocean foam, here where the wild swan flies. Blossoms adorn the dogwood tree, down on the old home place. Tar on my heels feels good to me, here in my state of grace.
Carolina raised me straight as a mountain pine.
Rocked me in her cradle, southern mother mine. North Carolina is my home, home far beyond all praise. Goodliest home under heaven's dome, here I shall spend my days. Carolina raised me straight as a mountain pine. Rocked me in her cradle, southern mother mine. North Carolina is my home, home far beyond all praise. Goodliest home under heaven's dome, here I shall spend my
Production funding for North Carolina is My Home has been provided in part by the Broyhill Family Foundation and by BB&T. To purchase a VHS copy of North Carolina is My Home, send $22.95 to North Carolina is My Home, Post Office Box 12231, Research Triangle Park, North Carolina 27709. The purchase price includes shipping and handling. To order by credit card, call toll-free 1-800-886-8852. Please have your credit card ready when you call.